If a player cleans his ball during play of a hole, except on the putting green, he shall incur a penalty of 1 stroke. That's a rule, Jerry.
But it's just a friendly game. Why do you always have to be such a stickler?
Because that's the way I was raised.
Welcome to Spirit of the Game, brought to you by the Colorado Golf Association. Here are your hosts, Ed Mate and Lewis Harry.
Well, we're back. Another month is launching. We're here in October. I've got my Halloween costume all picked out for the end of the month. I think I'm going to go as, I don't know. I got to think about what I'm going to go as. Maybe Tom Doak. I don't know. I think Tom would appreciate that. So it's Ed Mate here. Very special guest for this month's Spirit of the Game, our very own. We've done this now with a couple other very owns, Thomas Pagel, Robert Duke. Very proud of these guys. Today, I am privileged to have with us none other than the now famous, he wasn't famous when he was with us, Pete Lis. Pete, welcome.
Well, man, what an introduction that is. I'm not sure how famous or how privileged you are. I think the privilege is on this end here, but no, thanks. Look forward to catching up.
Well, it's great for you to join us. And it's funny, we'll get to this, but there's no such thing as a famous rules official. You don't want to be famous. That's not good, right? Yeah, that's like my worst nightmare. True. That's my worst nightmare. Yeah, we'll get there.
I know. We will. I have plenty of discussions we've had in the past on that.
Yeah, you've heard my opinion on that. So let's start with your background. Take us back just to kind of give you an idea where the story is headed. Pete was our boat right intern. He'll give us the details, but has gone on to a career as a rules official at the highest level on the PGA Tour. Always a lifelong dream. But I don't want to steal your thunder. But so tell us, take me back in time. I'm sure you'll jog my memory. But how did you find out about the CGA? Tell us what brought you here and how your golf career got started.
Yeah, I mean, my golf career started at a really young age. I was running carts at my place. The golf course I grew up at the age of 10, which I don't think was legal at the time, but we still did it. And they put me on the payroll at 14, which was legal. And that, just had a love of golf from the age of, 4, the first time I stepped on a golf course with my dad. And, I knew kind of that was going to be my career. I wasn't a very good student in high school, so I didn't have a lot of opportunities outside of high school. I went to school to be a golf professional, which in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which I did, and then I was a golf professional for one summer at a small 9-hole private club out in East Boston, Massachusetts, and
which is where you were, right? You were. This is in Massachusetts where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up on the western part of Massachusetts in the Berkshires, but
I'll interrupt here to say I will please know if you're listening. Obviously, you are listening, or that's obvious. Pete is not, and I mean not, a Red Sox fan, not a Patriots fan, just the opposite. So
that's absolutely true.
Just want to make sure the
Yankees, have had a really a poor year, unfortunately, especially with the payroll that we have. There's going to be some changes coming, and then my Giants looked absolutely awful Sunday night in the opening week, and then looked awful for the first half of the Arizona Cardinals game. Somehow Brian Dable must have gave a speech of his life and he came out firing. But we'll see tonight, Thursday night football with the San Francisco 49ers. But anyway, I digress. You got me going on that topic. So I was a golf professional in Boston, which I can clash with some of those Red Sox fans quite a bit. And it's just I loved the tournament running, the tournament side of being a golf professional, but hated everything else. The hours, not that the hours are much better now in what I'm doing, but and just the politics of it all. So when I got done with that summer, I said, I really want to focus on tournament administration. And I was really starting to think back about the places that I applied. I started researching, how can I get into just doing tournament and rule stuff? When I was in school, we had a rules of golf class that I did pretty well in, and I really enjoyed the rules. So I got on to the USGA's website and saw this PJ Boatwright junior internship program, and I said, "Man, that sounds pretty cool." And I started kind of looking at states and organizations throughout the country, and I was trying to think of them all today, and I couldn't remember them all. I know Northern California was one that I applied to. Obviously, Colorado, I think Arizona. Anyway, there was about 4 or 5, and I only got one callback, and it was the Colorado Golf Association. I went through that interview process. I remember that with you and Jerry Brown. And I think Ann Jeanette and I'm just trying to
Yeah.
remember all. Maybe even Dustin. I'm sure Thomas was in the room there too. It was it was really one of my first major interviews at the time for me, major interview, and I got a call back. I don't remember how long it took, but that you guys selected me, and I actually never got another response from any of the other organizations. I think maybe I got a letter from one, but I never got a call or anything. Just a rejection.
Once again, showing that we're smarter than our any other golf association. We got that one right. Well,
and
yeah.
it was, hey, listen, it was fantastic. It was a fantastic 12 months. I learned so much, in that time, between yourself and Warren Wilson and Jerry and Thomas, and Dustin, and all y'all. So, and I knew I wanted to be, a golf, a rules official. I knew I loved the rules of golf. I love the tournament aspect. I tried to play, kind of, never really a good enough player, and but I just knew I loved the professional game and loved the game of golf at the highest level.
Well, what I remember most about you was that was very clear. You made it clear that that was what you wanted to do, and you did it. And it took a while, and couldn't be more proud of the hard work you put in to get where you are today. And shows dreams can come true. And we'll kind of continue the story. Before we move on, though, the PJ Boatwright internship that the USGA sponsors is really, I think, one of the greatest things the USGA has done for the game of golf. They have brought people like you. I'm too old to have been a boatwright, but I have seen this program blossom really since the early 90s to what it is today. And you look at the leadership and the game of golf, and it's really just riddled in a good way with boatwright alumni like yourself. So kudos to the USGA for having the vision and foresight. And they named it right too, the legendary Pete Boatwright, or PJ Boatwright. And I know he'd be proud of you, knowing that rules were his calling card too. So okay, so then what happened? So you did your internship. It's all coming back to me now. We decided we didn't like it. We didn't like you that well.
Well, yeah, you didn't like it quite enough, and just that 12 months went by, and you kicked me out the door. No, just nothing was available at the time, and hey, that's life. And so I moved on to the Golf Association of Philadelphia. Mark Peterson, the executive director, another great mentor, great guy, another really exceptionally run organization, Golf Association. He asked me to come out and run their junior golf program, which I did, and I like I said, I loved working with him, Kirby Martin, Tyler, and just all those guys. They were just they're fantastic to work with, and I ended up liking it. But I really love Colorado. Colorado just had a special place in my heart. Really enjoyed just being out there, and fortunate enough, I can't remember, someone moved on in the organization there at the CGA. I can't remember exactly who it was, but it created a spot for me with Jerry Brown in the course rating and handicapping department. And he called and said, "Hey, do you want to come back?" I'm like, absolutely. I love it there. And even though it wasn't in the rules of golf department, I knew I was going to be doing, still some rules of golf and tournament admin stuff. And to be honest with you, I really think it was a great learning experience too, to get more involved in the course rating handicapping aspect. Just fantastic to learn all realms of the golf association business. Because yes, I did want to become a rules official, but there's not many of those. So learning, the time, just learning the entire golf association business, and I singled in on the tournament aspect, the rules of golf aspect, but the PJ Boatwright internship, that's just a small part of it, or I guess it's a pretty big part, but it is just a part of it. There's other parts of the organization, particularly now, and the way the golf association realm has just grown, and all the different facets and all that you all do. So it was fantastic to get to do that for a few years, and then I think see Warren I think had moved on, and and Thomas and I I think Thomas ended up being the assistant executive director, and I moved into the director of rules and competitions role, and which I think was in that role for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, we had an all-star team, man, between you and Thomas. Wow. Yeah. No, in all seriousness, we were, we needed somehow to make up for me, but no, that was a lot of fun in those years. And I just the energy and the passion you guys both brought, particularly for the rules. And that's something we really pride ourselves on. We have a culture here at the CGA where rules are really the foundation of the game of golf, obviously. And as golf administrators, you need to really have that skill set and be credible. So we're very proud of, and that culture has continued after you. Whether it was Brianna or Ashley, some of you are still here, some aren't. Robert Duke, we've always attracted that passion that we must have seen in you when we interviewed you. So for sake of time, because we got a lot of ground to cover, let's talk about your transition after being our rules and competitions director for several years, as I recall. Can't remember how many.
5 or 6. Yeah, I can't remember exactly either. But
an opportunity came knocking.
Yeah, so I was always still trying to look at what I can do in professional golf, and I can't remember how this opportunity came along. It might have been Thomas who mentioned it to me at one of the events that he was at, and said, "Hey, the LPGA is going to be hiring." I said, "Well, I want to get in professional golf somehow, and the only way, what better way just to get into golf, whether it's men's professional golf, women's professional golf." So I applied and went through their interview process, and they flew me out to Portland, Oregon, I guess, where Sue Witters, that's where she's from. And I just literally got off a plane, went through security, went to a restaurant in Portland, Oregon airport, and did an interview, and just went back through security, got on a plane, and headed back to Colorado. It was a process. And then one of my really good friends, my best friend, was getting married a few weeks later, and I got a call at the rehearsal dinner party, and I saw the number and I knew who it was, and I'm like, man, I can't answer this. It was, into the evening at the rehearsal dinner, so your state of mind might not have been totally on par there, but so I had a few buddies that kind of slapped me in the face and said, "Okay, you can do this. Just call her back." And I did, and at that point, they offered me the job. So, that was it was kind of a no-brainer. It was tough to leave the CGA and y'all, and especially for all that you had done for me, and gave me my first big start, and I learned so much there. But like I said, I saw this opportunity, and I kind of had to go for it, and spent 6 years out there, and it's 6 great years. A really great organization. Mike Wan had, they were going through some tough times, I think, before Mike had kind of taken over the realm as the commissioner, and they went from, I don't remember how many events. They went from like 20 events all the way up to, I think they had 35 when I left. And really, he led a great organization. And Sue Witters, who is the is the league official, chief official out there, and she was great to learn from. And comment, Jim Haley, and this a great crew. They're small and lean as far as numbers wise. You kind of do a lot of different things. But it was another just fantastic learning experience, and learning, it was kind of a good step for me to kind of get my feet, but learn the travel aspect, because that ends up becoming a really huge part of the job. As I know you had mentioned to me many times when you're telling me, hey, when I was telling you I wanted to do this, you're like, hey, just remember, you're going to be away a lot. And you really kind of found that out, right away, obviously. And it was a good way to kind of get my feet wet, as I said.
So then we'll finish this and we'll circle back, because what I want to do for the remainder of our time together is really talk about rules officiating. This is a rules podcast. I think our listeners will enjoy hearing the life of a rules official, and that's part of it. But also want to use this as an opportunity to talk specifically about some of the rulings you've been a part of, what you've learned, and all those things. So you're with the LPGA, been there 6 years. Then another opportunity comes along, as kind of you suggested or were thinking when you first took the job with the LPGA. So tell us how the PGA Tour position opened.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was on my way to the CME Tour Championship. I advanced that event in my time with the LPGA, and I think we'll probably talk more about what advancing is here in a few. But so I was down there, and I got a text message from Jim Duncan, who's the vice president of rules and competitions out on the Corn Ferry Tour, and said, "Hey Pete, just want to love to catch up with you at some point." Um, and he's like, "Well, what's my wife Kelly was with me and said, well, what's this about? What are they calling for? I mean, it's got to be maybe kind of cool." And kind of long story short, Jerry Foltz, who was doing most of the broadcasting for the Golf Channel on the LPGA Tour at the time, also did some Corn Ferry Tour stuff, and the position was coming open on Corn Ferry, and it was web.com at the time, and Jim Duncan was talking with Jerry about people and whatever, and he said, "Hey, you really should look at this Pete Lis guy out on the LPGA Tour." And Jim actually lives here in Wilmington, where I live, Wilmington, North Carolina. So it kind of worked out, and it took a little bit of time to kind of back and forth, and when our schedules didn't necessarily align quite well, quite easily enough. But we finally had a chance to get up to dinner, and they invited me out for kind of a test event. I worked one event out in Lafayette, Louisiana. Can't even remember the name of the event, but and to the Corn Ferry guys, and just did one event out there. And at the end of it, Jim said, "Hey, we'd like you to come out and start working for us." And I said, "Sign me up, buddy. This is fantastic." Mm-hmm. And spent 2 years, 2 seasons out there. And COVID kind of made it more like a year and a half because of a lot of everything that was going on. But spent just 2 kind of short years out there, and then which is great, too. It's just another stepping stone to get to where I'm at. And I had the fortunate opportunity, when you're working on the Corn Ferry Tour, you're working 4, 5, 6 PGA Tour events, supplementing their help throughout the year, generally in the beginning of the year when we have multi-course events. And it was getting to know some of those guys out there, and a few guys happened to be retiring at the end of 2020, the 2020 season. Dillard Pruitt and can't remember who else was retiring, but John Lovis, and so 2 positions had come open, and Gary Young said, "Pete, we'd love you to come over." And I was like, "All right, here we go." Now my dream is come true. It had taken how many years it had taken, probably 16 years, but here we are, and it's kind of was a dream come true.
That's fantastic. So I'd like to kind of dive right into, you alluded to advancing, and in the spirit of kind of staying kind of in the kind of the way a tournament is managed from a rules perspective on the PGA Tour. So I know the same is true with the LPGA. So why don't you just kind of elaborate a bit on what advancing means when you're a rules official on an official tour? Yeah.
So when you're the advance official, you're really the lead contact for that tournament for the entire year. And you have anywhere from our staff, we have anywhere between 3, 4. I have 5 advances on a regular every year. And so you're the lead contact dealing with the tournament director, the agronomist, the golf course superintendent. And then as the event you lead up to the event, you're there 1 week before. So you have tournament week, which is Monday to Sunday. You're there the week before, Monday to Sunday. And at that point, you're just really helping manage the tournament aspect. There's obviously a lot of stuff goes on, TV tower builds, grandstands. But it's also one of the few times that you kind of go back to your roots in the beginning, and you think of it's closest I have to remember to being in the golf association world is getting out there and you're marking the golf course, which is fun. You kind of you're doing your own thing. Yeah, you consult with some people, but it's your baby, it's your tournament, and so we're marking the golf course. We're selecting, working on the green speeds for the event, the mowing heights, rough heights, doing all that with the agronomist. Fortunate enough to have an agronomist on site the entire time with you. and we're putting together, the pro-am for the week. And then just you're really the liaison between the working staff that's coming out, the other rules officials, and the tournament, and all the information that they need prior to arrival, whether it's parking and dining and what our TV times are. And also, obviously, the most important part, the players, and making sure that everything is ready for them upon their arrival. Locker room is set up. We have registration ready to go. The dining hours are good. Where are they going to park? Where are spots for their families to eat? And so there's a lot that goes into it that's outside of necessarily the rules of golf. So when the tournament lights go on Thursday, you are out of there on the golf course as a rules official. But leading up to that, there's a lot of non-rules of golf stuff that just needs to get done, which is typical for any right. event. Kind of, it's very similar, I guess, to thinking of the Colorado Open. Colorado Open, one of the best state opens that I know y'all run, and it's just one of the best state opens in the country. And it's that kind of was another good way to learn, and there's just a lot that goes on to that. It's not just putting on a golf tournament. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah. So you're the advanced guy. Then how many other rules officials arrive? When do they arrive? And what does the rules team look like once as you said, the lights go on?
Yeah, so it varies at each event, but generally we'll have a minimum of 8. Most of the time, it's at least 9 rules officials. That's including the advanced rules official. And then you have an event like Waste Management Phoenix Open where you can't get around. So we have 10, 11, almost 12. It could be 12 right. guys just because you're so locked with so many people and getting around. And the way it's comprised is you have a chief referee. So we have 5 chief referees on staff on the PGA Tour, and they are the point of contact. So for once. So
are you a chief referee?
I am not a chief referee. I'm just a regular old tournament referee.
Okay.
The chief referee.
You're gonna get there. Yeah, you'll get there someday.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Gary Young, Stephen Cox, Ken Tackett, Stephen Toole, John Much, and Mark Dusbalik.
Okay.
I may have missed one, but
they're the ones that you generally see in the booth. All those names are familiar because they tend to get TV. Yeah.
If there's a very high profile, something controversial ruling, or we have most of the time it's a weather delay. If we have a weather delay, and the person that goes on TV is the chief referee.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also the ones that are making a lot of the decisions, do anything that player regulations wise. If there's something that we need to talk to a player or caddy about, they're the person the go-to person
mm-hmm.
for that week. Then you have your setup officials. So you have 2 setup officials each week, one on the front, one on the back. And setup officials, exactly that. They're the ones that are picking the hole locations for both the pro-am and the tournament rounds and the tee locations. And it's really up to them. With some insight from the chief referee and the advanced official, who obviously know the golf course really well. A lot of our guys, including myself, we set up a lot of the same places every year. So we kind of get a good feel of the golf course after, the first year. You can kind of rely on some help occasionally, but we're all professionals at it and we all enjoy doing it. It's one of the really fun perks of the job is to get into select locations. And, sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you get a bad one, but it's part of the deal. But it's really a fun part of the job.
Staying with hole locations, because that's always obviously when you, as you say, if anything goes wrong, it goes wrong, and it's a pretty big black eye if you pick a bad one. It doesn't seem like that happens often, if ever. Maybe you hear it, but just as a fan of professional golf and watching it, you don't generally hear a lot of banter around a bad hole location. But yeah, I'm curious, do you get a lot of grief from players about hole locations the way we do, it feels like? And how do you make, what constitutes, what is your process in selecting and to avoid it, like you said, a bad one?
Yeah, I think occasionally you get some comments, but these guys are just so good that you can put it in the most difficult spot. There's times I've set up holes and I go, there's no way these guys, we're going to see 5 birdies in this hole today. and they go out and there's 30 birdies on this hole.
Mhm.
It's just, they're that good. You can't tuck them enough at times. But there's times where, it just, whether they get short-sighted, sometimes it's um, maybe the way they played the hole, or sometimes, yeah, maybe we do get it, half a pace off or and whatnot. But yeah, the process of selecting the hole. I mean, first thing is always, what's your green speed and how receptive is the green for the shot that you're going to be playing in. What's the yardage that these guys are going to be playing in. So if they got a really short wedge in their hand, you can be a little bit more aggressive, maybe closer to a slope than you would be. But if they're playing 4 or 5 irons into the hole, you're probably going to be a little bit more conservative, give them a little bit more room and maneuverability to get around the hole. And so a lot of that's a pain. And then wind, weather, forecast. Are we really firm? Have we not had any much rain? Is it really firm on the golf course, or we have rain in the forecast and it's just going to be super soft? So
Yeah.
there's those factors. The one question you get is, sometimes I'll be out setting up and you'll have a marshal or a spectator say, man, that on a Thursday or Friday, and say, man, that looks like it should be a Sunday hole. There's no real Sunday holes. You're trying to balance that every day. You don't want the difficulty to be the most, the 18 most difficult holes on Sunday and the 18 easiest holes on Thursday. You want to balance that every day, and for a lot of different reasons. But you're just trying to just give them a similar test every day and to identify the best player that week.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into some. I'd say are you the only current PGA Tour rules official that also came up through the LPGA?
No, Bo Ream also.
Okay.
Bo Ream worked for the Arizona Golf Association. Then he was with the LPGA he actually was at the LPGA a little bit longer than I was. And now he's on the PGA Tour as well.
Okay, so when you were talking about hole locations and the type of shot coming in, how much different is it setting up a PGA Tour event versus an LPGA Tour event?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely some differences. And, interesting you asked that question. We have a new event at the end of the year called the Grant Thornton Invitational, which used to be the QBE shootout. And that's going to be a mixed team event with a professional, a men PGA Tour professional and an LPGA Tour professional. And this is going to be the first time, at least in my career, where we're going to have to set up jointly for this. I think there is, there are some differences. Obviously, you got to be a little bit, I think, with how high that the most of the guys on the PGA Tour hit it. You can be a little bit more tucky. You can tuck some hole locations a little bit more than maybe you can on the LPGA. But listen, the LPGA Tour, they hit it so good. It's unbelievable how good they hit it. And you can be pretty aggressive out there too, with them, and they hit it so straight. It's amazing how well they can hit a hybrid with surgical. It's just, I hit a hybrid and I've got 50 yard
dispersion. Yeah. Well, I just remember when you were on the LPGA, and you're a good player. You're very humble, but you're a very good player. You won our club championship here when you were playing at Common Ground. Even though I like to give you crap, I know you're a very good player. And you made it very, I said, could you play on the LPGA Tour? How much success would you have? And I can't remember exactly what you said, but tell us, how would you answer that question today? How well would you have done on the LPGA Tour as a scratch player?
If I made 1 or 2 cuts a year, I'd be happy. I mean, everybody thinks that, they play a shorter yardage and they're going out there and shooting 10 under, rounds of 10 under par. Well, they're that good. They really are. And it's a scratch player. They're playing on golf courses that are firm and fast, just like they do on the PGA Tour. And the rough heights are high. The fairways are narrow, and there's just so much more different than people really realize, than just going out and playing Common Ground or anywhere you're playing on a regular basis. Sure, yeah, you can go out and shoot a few under par at Common Ground and feel like you can do well on the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, if you're playing the same tees And but I'm telling you, it's just a different animal. I think the from the tees that you would play at Common Ground, the players in the LPGA Tour would shoot a lot under par all the time. It's just they're
Yeah,
that good.
I've gotten a tiny little taste of that playing a couple of years in the Colorado Women's Open, which is really effectively and not even an Epson Tour level. It's just kind of one notch below that. And when I play with those women in the pro-am portion, I'm just in awe. As you said, the ball striking, the consistency, the putting, the chipping, it's humbling. So I kind of laugh when I hear a male player kind of scoff and say they could play. And it's made me such a fan of women's golf. Quite frankly, I think the style they play, I know we'll avoid any topics of controversy, but the rollback that's being proposed, on the men's game, it really is a men's issue. And I think the game is in a lot of ways infinitely better, on the women's side, and for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can't say enough good things about how well they play, and I'm just really really excited to see them play side by side with Tony Finau, Ricky Fowler, with Nelly Corda's playing, Jess Corda, at least I think they're committed right now, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch them play side by side. We've gotten a little taste of that, in the past few years with Nelly Corda and Lexi Thompson playing in the event, but they played the same tees as the men. So this year we're going to mix up a little bit. We're going to go play a slightly shorter set of tees for the ladies, but it's just going to be, I think it's going to be a really good showcase for both tours here at the end of the year.
So let's move into rulings. I'm sure a lot of folks are curious to know how do you approach a ruling? Walk us through a scenario. You're on a zone, let's say, and you get a call on the radio. We need a rules official on hole 6, and you're the closest one. How do you approach that ruling? You kind of walk us through your process.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it goes to you just got to be prepared, and the preparation starts whether it's the beginning of the week when you arrive on site or the years that you get comfortable working the zone year in year out, so you just know the lay of the land. So you hear ruling 6 green, right at 6 green. You kind of like in your head, you're already starting to think, okay, what do I know about this area? Is there something there? Is there a grandstand that's there all the time, or do we have maybe a tire rut or mower damage of some sort? So I'm always trying to make sure I know the lay of the land before I get in there, so that I'm better prepared when I do arrive. When I do arrive, I try and park a little bit farther away, so I can assess, okay, as I'm walking in, okay, where is this golf ball? Where is he? What could this possibly be? Just so, again, you kind of can process in your mind as quickly as you can, okay, what's going to happen? And then, because we're also trying to make sure that, pace of play is obviously a huge part of the game. And we're always trying to make sure that we're keeping things moving as fast as we can. And then once you're arriving at the situation, sometimes it's as simple as you kind of know what the player is going to ask, or you're just going to ask them, hey, how can I help you? Is generally how I approach it. Hey, how's it going? So if I know them, or how can I help you? And said, hey, my ball's here. I grounded my club, and I'm not sure. I was making some practice swings near the ball, and the ball all of a sudden it just looks like it's in a new position. And then at that point you're just giving myself a really difficult one in this podcast, because that's a really that's one of the more difficult rulings that you can possibly have. But you're at that point you're really just trying to get information from the player. Okay, when did you notice the golf ball move? How far were you from the golf ball when you were taking your practice swings? Or, when you grounded your club, did the ball move instantaneously? Or, did you ground the club, walk away, all of a sudden, a few minutes, 10 seconds, 30 seconds later, did the ball move? Mm-hmm. And just trying to process that as much as you can. And, we're fortunate enough, we have cameras around every green, even whether it be a television camera or our ShotLink cameras that record every single shot played from around the green. So we have that fallback too, which which is a nice thing. Unfortunately, not everybody has that, but we do, and again, we do go to that occasionally, not very often, but there are times that we do that, and then from there, it's just the outcome. Okay, yep, no penalty, or yes, okay, you grounded the club and ball moved instantaneously. We're just going to go ahead and put it back with a 1-stroke penalty. So it's really about, like I said, I think it's about making sure you're well prepared in advance, and just knowing the lay of the land so that you can just be more effective, more confident. There's some intimidating players out there for sure, and there's a lot of big names that you see on TV. So you got to just stay focused and stay calm, cool, and collected, I guess.
So, do you have if you had to say, what are the top 3 rulings you get in a typical tournament? I'm going to guess that TIO relief of some sort has got to be number 1. I'm just guessing. What else would be on that? And the TIO is a temporary movable obstruction. This is the cities we build on golf courses that end up getting in the way of a player playing. What else is on maybe your top 3 list?
Yeah, I would think that one of them that's become more prevalent since we put it on our hard card, which is our local rules for every competition, every golf course we play, is what we call the 2-and-2 rule, where the immovable obstructions close to the putting green. If your ball is within 2 club lengths of an immovable obstruction that's within 2 club lengths of the putting green, it's kind of confusing, but get that quite a bit. Obviously, at TIOs, I mean, you could be sometimes if you're on a hole and you have a hole location that's close, you're getting it every group, and that's just makes your day go by really fast. But those are ones you just kind of that's one where you plan out ahead. I do this all the time where I have a string. I go and I find out where my point is, where my midpoint is. So I know, okay, if a ball's right at this point, he's going this direction. If he's left at this point, going this direction.
That's part of that being prepared.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the third one, it's tough to say.
What about balls moving? Like the scenario you just sort of made up there when I asked you the question hypothetically. Is that often where a player has a question about whether the ball moved or not? Or
I would say it's more often on the putting green, and as 2019 really cleared that up for us. It makes it so much easier to make that ruling. If a ball, our green speeds are so fast. I mean, if I say 12 is probably fairly average, I'd say we're probably even higher than that most of the time. And when you get green speeds like that on slopes, balls are going to move all the time, and you get any gusts of wind and just any ball mark, whatever.
So
I would say that's probably it.
One ruling I saw you make, I think it was Max Homa, was an embedded ball in a grass face. I may be wrong on that. I think he was doing a walking, and you were the rules official that got called in. I get excited when I see Pete. That obviously got a lot of attention at the U.S. Open with the Rory McIlroy. Just to ask you a couple questions about the embedded ball, because it was a high profile ruling at the Open. And this is a bit of me, I'm never short of soapboxes. When I see a ball in U.S. Open rough, and I'm holding up my hand to show you, penetrate the rough on a vertical face, and it's U.S. Open rough with that density of grass, it feels to me that it takes a heck of a lot of force for that to actually be embedded, really change the shape of the earth to get through all that grass. So how do you or what is the sort of guidance that you all agree upon as rules officials to determine if a ball's embedded?
So a lot of times, one of the first questions we'll ask is spectators or marshals around is, hey, did you see this golf ball bounce? And if they said, yeah, we saw it bounce and it kicked it this way, kicked over here, then, it's pretty evident that the ball is not embedded. It's just probably most likely in a cuppy, really bad, Bermuda grass or ryegrass lie. If nobody's around or we didn't see it bounce, then we're always going to generally allow the player to go ahead and mark the ball and lift it just without cleaning it, obviously, to determine whether it is embedded. And the way we do that is kind of, I think every official and maybe has their own way about it. One thing I'll do is I will try and probe around to see in that area as to whether the ball has broken the ground. And I'll ask the player first before I do that is, hey, do you mind if I just check to see the ground below? Because if his lie gets worse, and or sometimes I'll let a lot of times I'll let him do that as well. And hey, do you feel any depression in the ground? In the soil of the ground. We're not talking about the cuppiness of the grass. And if we do, then yeah, your ball is going to be embedded. And most of the time, all the time they're honest about that, and they're pretty good, and they'll understand that you kind of just have to explain to them what the rule is. A lot of times, if they see this kind of cuppiness in the grass and they think, well, that's embedded. Well, you sometimes have to explain the rule and say, hey, it actually has to break the soil of the ground. So you just think of it as you kind of have a tabletop, and did you make a dent in that tabletop? And the tabletop being the soil of the ground, not the grass growing on top of it. And if you made a dent in that tabletop and it's resting in it, then the ball's embedded.
Yeah, that's a good way to visualize. I sort of think of a plane. I'm holding up my hand here, and if I see that's embedded, I mean, that could be embedded even if there's grass intervening, because it's actually changed the shape of the earth, and that's always been, I think, a pretty good visual. I was sort of cupping my hand to show that the straight line has now been misshapen. Okay, so notable rulings you've made over the years. You had one this year, and I'd be remiss because I'm sure some of the Pete Lis fans out there want to hear about this. You had one with Justin Thomas that got a little airtime, and it involved, I think, a TIO, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what went on there, kind of how that got, because sometimes something you think is very simple is going to kind of get viral for a momentary period of time. Hopefully not too viral. That's the last thing you want. Yeah. But take us through that JT ruling and because it did kind of stand out.
Yeah, so here's another example of just kind of knowing your area and being prepared. So when I heard the ruling call, and actually I wasn't covered, I advanced that event, Wyndham Championship. So I know the golf course obviously very well. And I actually wasn't covering that area, but I was covering for, I think it was during our lunch rotation. And I heard the ruling right of 9 fairway, and I knew there's only two things it could possibly be. It could either be the balls across the path, which across the road that runs to the right, which means it's out of bounds, or there's going to be some question about the scoreboard, and we had some a restroom tent up there. So I actually got to the ball. It was kind of what we call an early call. I think JT had called it from the tee. So I arrived and got there before JT did, and had an opportunity to inspect the area before he arrived, and noticed that his ball was kind of right behind the tree, and that really, even though, yes, there was a temporary movable obstruction between him and the hole, there was also a tree between him and the hole that was going to prohibit him from playing a shot directly towards the hole. So I kind of waited and waited for him to arrive, and we just kind of discussed it. Actually, I think I stepped back aside and let him get there and really think whether he wanted to ask the question. And so when I got into the ruling, I knew what his question was going to be, and just tried to do my best to explain to him that we have to check a couple boxes here. A, does the temporary movable obstruction, is that directly between you and the hole? Yes, it is. That's one of the main things you need. So, okay, so we checked one box. The next box is we have to check, can you play a stroke that has that directly on a line for the line of play that you intend, and can you get the ball to finish on a direct line to the hole? And this is one that he couldn't check, because no matter which side of the tree he wanted to go on, there's no way he was going to be able to curve the ball hard enough to in my estimation, there's no way he was going to be able to get the ball to curve hard enough to get and finish directly on a line between him and the hole. So we had only checked one of the two requirements. for him to be entitled to relief in that particular situation. So yeah, we had a little back and forth, and I think maybe he had some previous rulings where maybe it was just slightly different, and he was entitled to relief. And there's also sounded like some instances where he knew that he wasn't entitled to relief, and he was just trying to understand, what the scenario was here, and
Right.
what was the differences between
Right.
the two. So that's how we kind of got there. But we only checked one of the two boxes, just because he couldn't get the ball
So
to
when that
finish on the back
ruling,
line of the hole.
when that verdict was rendered, did he accept it well and move on? Because sometimes you read about these things, and of course everybody in the media and on social media is trying to make everything into bigger than it is, and things are taken out of context. But did you feel like he was not accepting your ruling, or
No,
was
not at
he?
all. I didn't feel that way at all. I felt that he was just trying to get a better understanding
Okay.
of the rule, and why there wasn't relief in this particular situation. And again, I think he was going back to some situations that he had in the past, and that's what was maybe getting a little confusion in his mind. But no, I think he handled it very well, and it was understanding. And I honestly, I don't know what he did. I'm assuming he punched out to the left. I kind of drove off, and
Yeah,
don't
and
like to stick around for some of that.
staying with that for just a minute. It is an interesting rule, the TIO rule, and I have to admit, I'm a bit philosophically puzzled by why. And this is an example. 1999, John Van de Velde, Carnoustie hits his ball into the deep hay. A bad ruling was given where he was going to chip out 90 degrees back into the fairway, and there was a TIO, a television tower or something there, and the rules official wrongly gave him relief, but it was a very reasonable stroke, right? So you had to use reasonable in checking that second box. So I can understand why Justin Thomas was a bit confused by that, because I guess we're trying to limit just how wide and crazy you're going to end up, I suppose, with all kinds of unintended consequences and relief where it really isn't warranted. But in that particular case, the 1999 Open Championship at Carnoustie, I thought that was appropriate. I mean, that was a very reasonable. Now, as it turns out, he takes his relief and ends up hitting it on the green. And, that's one part of that tournament people tend to forget about for obvious reasons, the way that thing played out at the very end. So can you sort of rationalize why the TIO has to be between you and the hole? If you're making myself clear.
Yeah. And I think that the main thing is the rules, there's a lot of gray, but this is one of those situations we're trying to have as much black and white as we can. And once we start allowing some subjectivity to come in, and we already allow it a little bit with the 2-2 ruling, but where we start allowing what ball flights you're going to take, and what directions of play you're going to take, at that point where you really kind of can skew your relief areas, and by relief areas where the ball is going to be dropped. So I think that we're just trying to do our best in these particular cases. The USGA and all the people that make that write this rule, is just to make sure that we can try and keep it as black and white as possible. And I think that, and I would say that I do believe that Van de Velde situation is probably a little bit unique in that. Obviously, the ruling was unique, but we don't get that very often. I think that we do a really good job of our placement of these structures, and that you're going to have very few situations where a guy is going to be has to play directly at it and is not going to get relief. Like has a shot and is not going to get relief. So it's just one of those things. I think it's just, again, trying to keep it as black and white. You get that a lot around putting greens where you have, you give them the one. I know it's a confusing rule. You give them the one club length corridor. That's kind of their buffer zone from the side of the structure. And they say, well, I want to play. It's a sloping green. I got to play it over it. Well, we're giving you one club length, and that's going to be your buffer. We understand that maybe they have to play a slightly different shot because of the terrain, but again, we're just trying to do our best to keep it black and white.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, in this situation you have with JT, there was some subjectivity there, as you said, in your estimation.
Absolutely.
But you're right. If you broaden that, it would become, even a wider, you leave a lot more room for interpretation. I promised you we weren't going to keep you for more than 45 minutes, and we're already a little bit over, but I am going to keep you after class just for
That's fine. All good.
just really one more topic, and we could talk all day. And I know you have other things you need to do.
No worries.
But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up pace of play. As you know, this is a major soapbox of mine. Still is. I haven't changed. I'm still just as crazy as ever. I swear to God, it's going to be the death of me because I get so just lathered up on the topic. I know you love baseball, and I got to tell you, I am so amazed at how impressed I am with how baseball took the bull by the horns, made some huge changes with the pitch clock, bigger bases, no shift, and they have a better product. And I know that you got one ball in play, you've got all eyes on that one ball. It's a very different thing. Do you think, I'll start with this, and then I'd like you to just sort of respond more generally to, do you think pace of play is a problem? But the specific question is, if your answer to that is yes, pace of play is a problem. And again, not everybody agrees on that, right? Not everybody agrees that distance is a problem. One of the things I've learned as I've gotten older and a little bit wiser, I hope, is just because I see it as a problem doesn't mean everybody sees it as a problem. I see pace of play as a problem. And I have a lot of evidence to suggest that there's a lot of people that agree with me. Not the least of which is you just bring up the topic and people roll their eyes and cringe. And so it's a negative thing. So could you put a shot clock, institute a shot clock in professional golf? And this is what I would propose. You put it on the putting green only. And when you arrive at the green, I know, again, all the devil in the details. When does the clock start? Do you do it per player? Do you do it? Is that such a crazy idea? Because to me, I've observed that the majority of the time that contributes to pace is on the putting green. These guys are not, and gals are not that slow tee to green. You have exceptions, but for the most part, they move, they hit shots, and then they use that time, they manage that time so that they have more time on the putting green. The putting green is where everything just comes to a complete stop. So why is that such a crazy idea that we couldn't have shot clocks on putting green?
Yeah, so the first question, though, I think pace of play is a problem. I think pace of play is a challenge. I'm not sure it's necessarily a problem. I think anytime we have 156 players on a golf course on a Thursday and Friday, it's just the inevitability of it is there's just nowhere to go. And the way that some of these poles play, par five, reachable par fives, and reachable par fours, it's just there's going to be waiting, there's going to be slowdowns. So to say that it's necessarily a problem, I'm not sure I totally agree. I think that it's definitely a challenge, and we would like to see faster rounds, sure, but I think we also have to deal with the number of players that we have. To your shot clock question, I think the challenge there is having enough qualified bodies to do that. And there are so many variables that go into, as you mentioned, when does the clock start? When does the clock stop? So to say that, hey, I'm going to put a camera there I'll just time everybody via camera. Well, there's a lot that you don't pick up on a camera, whether it's a cart that's driving, in his through line and he's got to back up, or he's waiting for spectators to move. There's Tiger's group is walking by, or something to that effect. So there's just so many different distractions that can happen that you just really need qualified people to do to be able to handle that. So to say that, and honestly, I'm talking from my personal experiences. That has nothing to do, this is not a PGA Tour stance or at all. I just think that would be the challenge, and I don't see it. I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
No, I don't. I hear you loud and clear. And even in baseball, I watch when I go to a game and you see the pitch clock. There's some subjectivity. You'll see the batter back out. They stop the clock. There's all kinds of variables, but whoever's hitting that clock, is definitely the easy part is just one. There's only one ball in play as opposed to 156 balls in play. So I guess what frustrates me is the negativity around pace of play, in this sort of us versus them, the sort of finger being pointed at the rules officials. It's their fault. It's the players' fault. You just need to give out more penalties. And I just feel like we're just going through this ritual. And what I really applaud baseball for doing, one of the most traditional games of all, is, you know what, we're going to address this. And they did. They implemented it through the minor leagues. They burned it in, and so I think that should be that's commendable. And I think it's something golf whether it's a challenge or a problem, I do think golf has room for improvement on pace. And maybe it's just a clock that's up there for information only. So these guys kind of see it, because my biggest pet peeve with pace of play is there's no real reward or incentive to play fast, because the train is moving at a certain pace. So anything that doesn't move the train faster is pretty much not particularly effective. So what I like about a shot clock is it moves theoretically, it would move the entire train more quickly. Because the idea that you can only be subject to penalty when you're out of position is kind of like, it just feels to me that you're fighting a problem, or you're trying to cure a disease that's already a bad prognosis. So what's you know what I mean? It's just frustrating.
Yeah.
So I'll try to wrap that up in the form of a question. Are there things that you see that you're doing from a pace policy that's moving the train faster versus just timing a guy who's out of position?
Yeah. So exactly. We do have some policies in place, and I think we're going to do some tweaking for the start of next year as well, and to continue to improve it. But one thing that is public and has been announced, I think it hasn't really gained as much traction as I think it probably should have, is we do, as officials, when we're in quote unquote our zones, because generally when we're working a week, we're in a zone. We're not walking with one group. We're covering a set of holes. And granted, we can only see one group at a time and one player at a time, but we time every group, every player that goes through us. And if they are over a certain amount of time, and then there's other ramifications for that throughout the year, throughout the round, throughout the tournament, where if they're take over 120 seconds, which is a lot of time. 2 minutes is a lot of time to play a shot. There are sanctions and other things that we can do, whether it's start timing that player or group right away. Generally, it's just player. We don't do any group. If one player has a bad time, we can, without being on the clock, without formally letting them know they're being timed, but they are always being timed by an official as they go through our zones. Now, there are some times where they're waiting in the middle of the fairway. There's a there's a couple group wait on the long par three or reachable par four. We're not going to not necessarily timing those, but generally, if a player is going through our zone, we're timing those players, and if they get over a certain amount of time, then they are subject to immediately just going on the clock. So we have some things in place that to help with that. It's just some things that just aren't really, I guess, seen in the media or Twitter or whatever that we're doing on on a regular basis. And I will say that there are times, and it's just not seen, that we talk to a lot of players about this stuff. So,
well, and you get the benefit of having other arrows in your quiver to incentivize that we don't see. Fining, sanctions, just being known as a slow player is something that not very many people like, I wouldn't imagine. So just not wanting to be singled out. So thank you for educating, because that's not something I was aware of, that you could be subject to timing. I know the AJGA, who's always done really innovative things with pace, has done something similar, where they have an egregious policy, I'll call it, where they get a time and they have a lot of eyes on the players in their intern program. Same idea. And I think that's great, because this idea that you're only subject to a problem, the lights only come on, the accountability only steps in when you fall out of position. And you are contributing, when you're taking 120 seconds, to the slowness of the entire train, and you ought to be held accountable. So that makes me feel a little bit better that you're addressing the challenge. So, well, listen,
we are. We're going to continue to address it. So it's good.
Well, again, I've checked every box, speaking of boxes, that I wanted to cover, because I knew we didn't have 2 hours or 3. Last thing before I let you go, anything else that you'd like to share with our audience about Colorado Golf Association, your time here, just kind of your perspective? And again, I just say we're very proud of you, and we take a lot of pride knowing that you started here.
Well, I would just say that the Colorado Golf Association is one of the best, if not the best, golf associations in the country, and I got to see that firsthand. I think the players there enjoy it. You got some of the best golf in the country, and a lot of different options of golf, mountain golf, kind of low plains, desert golf, just classic golf. It's just such a fantastic spot, and I was so fortunate for y'all to hire me, and for me to have, as I said, have an opportunity to see it firsthand and learn from some great minds. You don't give yourself enough credit. You've worked plenty of major championships in your day, Rules of Golf Committee member. So you're one of the top rules minds in the country as well. So I was fortunate to learn from you, and then obviously Thomas Pagel, who everybody knows who he is nowadays. He's the famous one out of the boat race. But he's so proud of him too. I mean, he's doing such a fantastic job with USGA, and I wish I got a chance to see him a little bit more than I do each year. But no, I just can't say enough for how good, and thank you enough for the opportunity that you all gave me, and to make my dream come true. So here I am.
Great. Well, that's a great place to leave it. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I'm going to ask you the real tough questions. It's been great having you, and we'll do this again. Thanks, Pete.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you.